Welcome to another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm-Up Sessions podcast. And I don't know why. The only thing that keeps running through my mind is stay classy. What is it? Stay classy?
No.
Boston or
no?
What is it?
Is that? Are you talking about the one from
Mr.
Anchorman?
Burgundy?
Yeah, Burgundy. Ron Burgundy.
Ron Burgundy.
Yeah.
It's like stay classy.
San Diego.
Yeah. I don't know why that was like
yeah.
that was just the most random.
I need to
Anyways.
rewatch that one.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it popped up on Apple TV. Remember, I was telling you, Apple TV is like featuring movies.
Yeah.
That's one of them.
Yeah. Dude, shout out to Apple TV.
Let's go. Best streaming network.
Honestly, I think so. I think they're crushing it. The only thing is they just don't have enough volume. Like you watch a show and you're like, cool. Well, there's nothing to watch. You got to wait a year until another film is produced or something. But when they do release it, I think they're bangers. Way better than Netflix. Way better than any other streaming platform.
Struggling. But yeah.
Struggling. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, let's pour some batchy. Let's get some coffee rolling and then we'll jump into this episode. Sir, what are you doing?
I don't know.
My guy. This is a spillage here. There's a whole.
Yeah, I was just watching the wave.
We have a spill on aisle 3 here.
Do we have any towels? Microfiber towels?
I'll go get some.
Okay, sick.
Right,
I'll pour myself some. Oh man, I was just distracted by a thought that I'm like, man, I don't think I'm wearing the right shirt for the pod.
Why?
I wanted to wear my t-shirt. It's a little toasty. I don't know. I didn't think I would want to be like that formal with a nice little button up and the Chance hat. I think I want to create like this persona for the pod. Like I always think about the fact that Peter McKinnon got like very famous on the owl hat from James Coffey.
Oh yeah.
Like that was his initial fame. Was everyone talked about the guy with the owl hat? That wasn't
his fame. That was just a touch to his fame.
Character, yeah. He made a character out of it. Like that's what I'm thinking. I need to find that hat, that iconic piece of something to wear on every episode.
Dude.
It's much better.
This is substantially better than last week of the same coffee being brewed. Yeah. Substantially better.
Still bright.
Yeah. You know what the interesting thing is we went half a step coarser last time, and it knowing what it tastes now at a half step finer, it didn't taste under extracted.
When then?
Yeah, it just tasted dull, like kind of flat and suppressed.
But if it was coarser,
I know, but I'm thinking like, yeah, but it was coarser, you'd expect it to be way brighter and way sour, way more sour.
Yeah, I see what
but then all of a sudden we tightened it, and it just became more flavorful, but it didn't taste sour before, which is weird.
Bright.
Yeah,
totally.
It almost got brighter as you fined it up for some reason.
Yes, that makes sense.
Which
You're
is
still extracting more. I think that was how poorly extracted the last batch was.
Could be. Yeah.
Bad.
Yeah.
But did you do 50 grams in and 800 for water?
Yeah, I think I did like 780 for water or something.
Okay. Yeah, it tastes fine. Tastes like last time was watery and weak, and under this tastes fine.
I think it could go even finer.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Which is weird because this coffee naturally clogs what we've been brewing, but then we're grinding way finer. I don't know. Maybe it just needs more contact time.
Yeah, it's great. It's not bad. Good in the right direction.
Nothing compared to the cupping, but you're still getting a little bit of the blackberry, just a slightly kind of berry, fruity.
Is this the same roast as the last
slight
one?
boozy. Yeah.
Okay. I was gonna say it still tastes slightly fresh.
Oh no,
but it can't be. It's
no,
like
it's
3 weeks off roast.
It's pushing over 2. Yeah, but definitely could go way finer. Yeah, which is exciting.
It's like zingy. Like a nice zinger. Has like the zippy or zingy acidity.
Yeah. Still, it has like that booziness that I was getting off of the Diego coffees. That's why this keeps reminding me of the Diego coffees.
Oh, dude, that soup was great. That was a very complex soup.
Speaking of having a little persona on the podcast, listen, you can get a persona on the podcast once we win the Sprudgy podcast award, whatever that is. Yeah. They have an award for everything. It's like best toenails. Okay, who knows what that is? Like, how do you even know that? Who do you nominate for that? Like, I don't know. Look around, peek around, brewing counters. Look at your barista with some, I don't know,
strange things.
Yeah. So I mean, speaking of counters and toenails, what's it called? You said like Steve Jobs is, what is it? Burks sold for like 20,000.
Yeah. Classic. No, I mean, when you told me when you were in the cafe this morning, we talked about all this, and you mentioned
came out of nowhere.
Yeah, that folks were like dropping us, and then. Well, I mean, I didn't even know the Sprudgies were going on.
I didn't know either.
I totally forgot about it. But then to hear that folks were nominating our podcast and then tagging us on IG for that, like that was a surreal like kind of feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
it's great.
Friends, if you're, first off, if you haven't left a review or put some stars on this podcast streaming platform that you're listening on, go ahead and do that. Drop some ratings. Some ratings help us. We're still a pretty low-key podcast, but we're also 80 plus episodes deep, which is pretty insane to think. We're going to have some really fun guests coming up here. We're just doing some planning. But that being said, if you really want to go an extra step, and you feel like we've done you justice with the coffee info over 80 episodes, we're one of the few still podcasts that are consistently uploading. So if we've helped in any way, friends, head over to Sprudge, go submit that vote. I don't care if you vote for anything else on there. Just go to the podcast section, drop in Coffee Roaster Warm-Up Sessions podcast by Mira Coffee Roasters. We'd appreciate it. That'd mean the world.
Yeah.
So it would be insane. Like, honestly, I don't know. We might just retire the podcast once that happens. We won. All right, on to the next thing. Yeah. The next one is best coffee film video.
Yeah, that'd be fun. I'm getting into a mood of like nostalgic, kind of reminiscent mood, thinking about how long the podcast has been around. Have we done an episode
how
on
long
that?
The what?
The podcast.
Oh, the podcast?
Yeah.
Like podcast.
Sorry, yeah. I'm like stumbling over my words right now. But maybe one day we should do a podcast on like a look back. Or maybe, here's an idea. You can take a bunch of little segments out of each podcast and stitch them. Yeah, moments podcast. Yeah. 100th episode? I don't know. We were thinking about something cool for the 100th episode.
That's right. So, it's coming.
Might not. Maybe a 101st episode.
Yeah, 101st 101. Yeah.
That's good stuff. Good times.
But anyways, so yeah, this episode, I think there's a lot of things in coffee that, if you're in coffee for so long that you start to, there are some things that, are assumed and implied, but not necessarily stated very often. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it makes sense a lot in my mind that we just assume that some of the basic elementary things are just like a given. Like everybody knows that. Why are we going to talk about it? When in reality, like everybody's in different parts of their journey, in their coffee career, in their coffee, adventure or education, wherever they're at, And so actually today I came across a post on a Facebook group that we're a part of that made me really think, because somebody was asking like, hey, where do I find coffee beans for my coffee shop? But I was thinking about it. To me, it's obvious. Well, duh, I'm a coffee roaster. Obviously me. Yeah. But that's not quite the case, and I think there's a lot of variables to keep in mind where, somebody like you, Serge, who, you've been a manager for a handful of years. For you, it might be second nature to where your mind goes in different avenues as to what goes into a buying decision of choosing the right coffees and origins and all this stuff for your cafe. Or it might not be the cafe. It may be the cafe. It may be, maybe you want to open up a breakfast joint where you just you have tasty, insane brekkie, but then you want like a little sipper on the side to serve batch brew. Or, maybe you want to open up like, a breakfast spot or maybe a coffee cart. Maybe you want to open up like a very minimal, like hole in the wall that's only open like 2 days a week, which we've seen happen before. So and or maybe you're like at a church.
Yeah.
And you're like,
an office.
So,
Yeah.
and somebody's like, dude, you're the coffee guy, stuff. Can
Yep.
you set up a coffee bar? Because we want to start introducing that to our guests or employees or whatever it is. And so there's some thought process that needs to happen. And so that's kind of what we wanted to talk about, even though it may seem very basic and simple. So what do you think? What's the first thing to keep in mind as to well, two things is one, what coffee should you get for your cafe or your coffee car or your business or church or whatever? And where do you find that? Who do you go to for that?
I think you've nailed the first one already. That's one, determining like what kind of business you are and what guests are you trying to serve. Like, what are those guests looking for? It's going to be completely different if you're an office, just wants some drip coffee, which we have friends who do that. They just buy coffee from us. They have a subscription, and basically they're just providing black drip coffee or maybe, with cream in their office on a ratio of 6.
Yeah.
Almost like a home setup, but in a public place.
Yeah.
Very easy. You know what I mean? That's a whole different determining factor than, let's say, you're a mom and pop cafe that's looking to create a bunch of flavored drinks, blended drinks, and you're looking for that coffee flavor. Maybe you're a bakery that's adding coffee into your bake.
Or a bakery,
That's like
excellent.
You have those determining factors, or those are the major determining factors in what you will be looking for. So I think, for example, to use that same example, if you're like our friend Kyle, who is serving our coffee in his real estate office, for example, one of the things he wants to create, like kind of a welcoming atmosphere. So you have to think about like what coffees are gonna basically represent like his personality, who he is, and then what coffees are also going to be welcoming to the group. So with that mindset, thinking those things through, the first thing is to look around, I would say locally, right? Like, who is roasting coffee near me? I mean, that may even be a Google search, like coffee roasters near me. And starting there and then picking up samples, right?
Right.
That would be the main thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think knowing who you're going to be serving is a big one.
Right.
Because, and the what I want to highlight there is that sometimes what you would want to drink is not what the people walking through your doors want to drink.
Right.
And what the people walking through your doors want to drink might not be what you want to drink.
Right.
And so that's kind of like a difficult thing that you actually have to consider. A little more you have to consider that when you're a business or cafe, like a bakery or like a diner or a breakfast spot. That's going to be a little bit more important to think about as opposed to like an office. An office space is like, dude, this is something free we're providing for our employees, take
it or leave it.
Yeah, take it or leave it kind of thing. So you really have to consider that. And so as much as you might want to be drinking fruity naturals and anaerobic coffees, but if everybody who walks in through your bakery who's picking up a croissant and doesn't like that, it might not be as successful as you want it to be. And I think that's so important. You have to keep in mind, and that's sometimes very difficult to think about and wrap your mind around. So you're gonna want to consider those options and maybe even find ways to work around them. Maybe sacrifice a little bit from yourself, but maybe have two options. It's okay to have, for some people, for those listening to the podcast, we have a specific kind of niche group of people that listen to our podcast, but it might actually mean serving a dark roast and then having an anaerobic coffee right next to it. Now that would be an insane combo to have inside one building, but it may be actually the smartest and best thing, both for you financially, for your customers, for yourself, just the enjoyment, because I hope you enjoy it, you know. So I think that's very important to keep in mind. But I think you're right. The kind of where you are going with that is like, find a roasting company near you and get some samples. And I think all those things will work together, because you need to consider what your guests like and what you like. Write that out and then ask yourself, which roasting companies near me, preferably near me, can provide that flavor profile and that flavor experience, or which roasting companies around the country can provide that for you if there's nobody in your town or in your city that can offer that. So, and most of us, if you're going to offer a coffee, most of us are already drinking coffee. So ask yourself, like, man, is there a coffee shop that you normally go to that serves like your favorite drip or your favorite latte? And it's okay to walk in there as, for some people that might be uncomfortable, but it's okay to walk in there and say, hey, who's roasting your coffee?
Yes,
I like it.
Yep.
And, some people might think, oh my gosh, like that's competition or I don't want to serve somebody that's already being served in town. Listen, that's such a minor thing.
Yeah.
Like, don't get hung up on that. Your goal is to offer a really beautiful, wonderful experience to your friends and to the people who are going to be coming in and wherever you are, whether whether you're an office or a bakery or a diner or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So
I again, like touching a little bit on like idea of like competition. Again, if your whole business is not necessarily defined around coffee. Yeah. Maybe it is like breakfast, or our friends at Jux's Tap House. Yeah. They're a tap room with food, but they serve our cold brew that they buy from us wholesale.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter if like there's a cafe down the road that serves the cold brew.
No.
Or it doesn't play anything. I would say even sales wise, it does not matter because you're providing a different experience, and this is an addition to already a flavor palette that you're developing across your taps and options that you're providing.
And actually, I'm going to even go further. I would say, yes, it doesn't actually play that big of a role. But actually, on top of that, people who are going somewhere else might actually show up to you because they're so familiar with that flavor profile. Yep. They actually enjoy it. So when their friends are like, hey, where do we go? Oh, we can go here. Oh, I like the coffee because they also serve Mir like the other guys, and I'm a fan of Mir. You know what I mean? Like I don't know, like it's like if a place is already serving what your customers like, you're just giving it to them. It gives them another reason to actually walk through your door. So might actually be
But I think there is also a valid point to make is when it could be competition is when like 5 identical cafes within like a mile are all, their slogan is serving the best coffee. And you know what I mean? There's a lack of definition to a cafe and everyone is serving the same coffee. Then there's competition. But again, if there's attributes in your business or your restaurant that are setting you apart, and coffee is just one of the things that you're offering. Yeah. You know what I mean? So for a tap house, it's going to look completely different than if you are a multi-roaster who wants to bring on similar coffees in town.
For sure.
So it's not like 100% like black and white, and it's not an easy answer here. That's why defining and understanding your company and then understanding your guests is key. But I also think within that, it's like, let's say you reached out to a roasting company, you've talked to them, and you've kind of established an idea of what you want. There's still going to be a ton of options to dig through, right? Like, of course, a ton. Yes. Like, I mean, especially things like Colombian coffee is not really like a obvious answer in how they taste. We're getting so many flavor profiles from, Colombia right now. Of course. So I think one of the easy things to do, as intimidating it may sound for some new cafe owners or business owners, is to quote unquote cup coffees or, do a coffee tasting. Yeah. I think that's such an important part that a lot of the times I hear cafe owners or establishments that are choosing coffee are not doing that. Mm-hmm. And I would say like you should. That's a big part of choosing coffee is actually tasting it, right? Yeah. And I think, cupping for sure is, our ideal way of tasting coffees. And we do that all the time. We just did it like 30 minutes ago. Mm-hmm. But, at the least what you could do is get those samples in from this roasting company and brew it up in many different ways. Yeah. Brew it on French press, brew it on pour over, brew it on, espresso, brew it on batch brew. You have a drip coffee machine, brew it on there. And ask yourself, also like what kind of drinks am I going to be offering? Yep.
and then go and make that drink with that coffee and see, do I like it? Is this rubbing me the wrong way? Is this, not tasty? What do we, and go from there, and let that be actually a big guiding factor to your decision. So yeah,
that also would help, like taking that feedback from that experience, bringing it back to the roaster, or having that feedback as almost a library of what you like and don't like is very good to have. Because then you can go back to the roaster or meet another roaster, or even contact someone now like outside of your area. You kind of have an idea of what you're looking for in flavor. And you can say, I cupped this coffee or tried this coffee and I like this, but I really didn't like this.
For sure.
Is there something that you have that we can lean on this?
Yes.
That's so much easier to have a conversation.
Yeah. I think that's helpful also for the roaster to get you exactly what you need.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember we just reached out to Distretto Coffee. I think that's how you pronounce it, down in Los Angeles. They're just opening up a cafe in the near future. So if you're in Los Angeles, keep your eyes peeled for that. But I reached out. I was like, hey, I heard you're starting a cafe and you might need some coffee beans. What are you looking for? And he literally got back to me, said, hey, this is the flavor profile that we're going for. This is kind of, we're huge fans of Central, South American coffees, all this stuff. And I was like, dude, I know exactly what you're looking for. I know exactly the flavor profile you're going for. And guess what? We have a coffee that's going to get really, really close to that. And we shipped it. He tried it alongside of a handful of other coffee roasters and said, dude, these guys nailed it and they had exactly what I needed. Yeah. And I was able to do that simply because he had some information to give to me that I could then help him find what he needed.
Yeah.
And if, sometimes people ask us of flavor profiles and we're like, we're actually the wrong people for that. We can't offer that actually. But hey, let me tell you, there's a guy down the street that roasts coffee. I think he can actually have a better flavor profile for you.
Yeah.
100%. So I think that's, I think it's just going to be important for the roaster, but then also for you, and might save you some time of tasting coffees that you might not enjoy or you might enjoy. That being said, I think something else I remember from my conversation with Distretto is that they had like a price ballpark that they wanted to play with. And I think that's very important. Like maybe give some insight as to you guys at Narrative. You guys have a very interesting coffee selecting process, but not to get too deep into that. Talk about a little bit about the pricing. How do you guys approach that?
Again, because our major focus at Narrative is coffee itself, we're able to have a fluid price. And it's the classic, market price. So everything is always changing for us. And we mark up our coffees basically the same. But because different coffees from different roasters are coming at a different wholesale price, we just kind of have a sliding scale, and it just moves with the coffee itself. So it makes it fairly easy for us to price coffees, but it also can be slightly complicated in a sense. For me as a manager, I deal with around 15 different coffees, and I have to price each coffee out, and they're not always the same. So there's that movement.
When you're buying coffee, is that something you're thinking about, or is that something when Narrative thinks about? That's what I mean. More on the coffee buying. Is that something that people should be bringing to the roaster?
Yeah, that's also been part of our conversation. Of course, I mean, me and Max even talked about it from a roaster to multi-roaster cafe conversation. And gosh, I don't want to say a lot on this because still there's things we're deciding, but there's this so-called equation on basically price to kind of reward, because there's some coffees that are all priced within a certain range, and we have to process the flavor and be like, okay, is this flavor profile or is this coffee worth this price, even though it tastes similar to maybe a different coffee at a different price? You see what I mean? There's that tension. So yes, that pricing, there is a small determining factor, but again, within the model of how we're serving coffee, it's almost like, hey, if the coffee is expensive, we're just going to charge more for it. Does that make sense?
But I think, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys buy accordingly. So it's not like you guys are going to buy a bunch of coffees, just the most expensive ones.
No, right. There's tier.
There's some kind of thought process that goes into that.
Yeah, for sure. There is a tier in a sense. And also because, again, we serve like a wild and a tame, there is some coffees that are going to be not as high of price as others, like rare. Like, obviously, we're going to serve a Gesha, but we're also going to serve some common coffees that are much more approachable to people. So yes, there is that deciding factor when we're purchasing these coffees from other roasters, like what can we serve and where can we serve it? Where does it fit on our menu and how does the pricing come out for it?
For sure. I think that's like a whole other podcast of its own, is like pricing stuff. How do you communicate pricing to, the people in your cafe or in your space that you're serving coffee? Because how you buy coffee for a cafe is going to be very different than how you buy coffee for your office space
or a diner.
Yes, or a diner.
That's my point. Yeah,
and that's something that I think you very much need to consider. And so, because like at a cafe or bakery, you might be charging them for something. At an office space or at a church, it might be you're offering it for free. And you can't buy insanely expensive, juicy, beautiful geishas, even though you might want to. It may not be the smartest thing to do.
Totally.
But I think, reflecting back on this episode as we wrap this up, I think all of these, this episode wasn't simply to say this is the coffee that you should be buying, and this is the exact template. But it's more as giving you a guiding direction in what direction you should go. And it's really just outlaying like, hey, if these questions that we've asked in this episode, if you can answer all of them, put them on a sheet, and then stand back and look at it overall, that will actually narrow down your options quite a bit. Like a lot. Like if you can figure out this is the flavor profile I'm going for, I like light roasted coffee or dark roasted coffee. All of a sudden, the amount of options that may be overwhelming, of like what do I buy? All of a sudden now you're like, oh, there's actually a select few that might actually fit this, and that might make it easier for you to choose what's right for your space.
Yeah, and like in these short, like we're under 30 minutes, but. In this short little segment of a podcast, we only basically touched on two major things, right? It's like deciding based on preference and maybe quote unquote quality. And also like deciding based on like price and how those two things actually go hand in hand. Like those are kind of the major ones. But there's also so many like other things that are like deciding factors. So I would say like this is a good starting point to ask those questions, like you said, to kind of separate and push things away and bring things in. But then don't stop there. And then continue to explore other opportunities. Like, why do you want to go local? Why would you not want to go local?
Right.
How are you going to process like basically shipping, all of the supply chain things? What's the future going to look like with this coffee? Like, do you want to then turn into like white labeling your own coffee?
Right.
Like there's so much other questions that you should start processing. But I think if you start with those two, you'll kind of push unnecessary things out of the way and then continue to focus on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think definitely this is not, an end all be all. There's so many more things that are going into hand. On the flip side, if you're a cafe or bakery, this is wild, but maybe you don't need to be buying coffee. Maybe you should go and roast your own coffee. That's a curveball in the conversation,
totally.
but I think it's worth thinking about. And so hopefully this gave you guys some kind of direction to head into, and hopefully this was helpful. So, any final thoughts?
Yeah, here's an idea. Here's a thought to all of our techie friends who are listening. Like maybe there needs to be like a network, an app, or a database that helps connect folks who are, or maybe there is and I just don't know about it, helps connect roasters and other like cafes or folks who want to serve coffee in their establishment. Like some kind of connection. It would basically be like a sales job for like all the roasting companies in the United States. But I think it could be a powerful tool.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, actually what that brings up is, what I was going to say is that, make sure you utilize your community and your network of people.
Yeah.
That's such a big thing, is like literally find all the people who already have own cafes or own some kind of small business, restaurant, or whatever, and just ask around. It's totally okay to ask somebody for help for choosing something like this, and just see why they like it, why they don't like it, what's been tough, what's been hard, and what's been easy and great, and just ask around.
Yeah.
I mean,
and if you're listening and you're not a cafe owner, let's say you're a home barista, I mean, honestly, there's probably folks in your like sphere of influence that look to you as the coffee person.
Yes.
Therefore, you have a voice to shout out your favorite roasting company. And that is very helpful. I'll tell you, like that kind of word of mouth, because one, you as the coffee person in your circle of friends, you have established a degree of trust, and therefore that trust has so much value for other roasting companies that you can basically share, you know what, I've loved like Onyx Coffee Lab, like you should serve them. Or I've loved Mirror, like you should serve them. Because that word, that relationship and trust built is going to carry a lot of weight.
And trust me, the owner who's starting this will appreciate that help.
Yeah,
you're actually doing them a favor.
Yeah.
More. So, well, friends, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Coffee Roaster Warm-Up Sessions podcast. Hopefully this was helpful. This went by way quicker than I was expecting. So thank you so much for tuning in if you're still listening this far. But remember, as always, reflect what's good.